Hi class, today we're going to talk about chapter 19, the early Greeks from the story of the world. In this video, we are going to review chapter 19, talk about the Mycenaeans, their cities, Linear B, which was their writing system, and the Greek Dark Ages. So let's start with your chapter 19 review. So in chapter 19.1, the Mycenaeans, you learned that the Minoans, their country, and their culture were destroyed. The Mycenaeans come from mainland Greece and they take over the island of Crete. They learned how to sail from the Minoans who were left, and they sailed to different islands and they started building colonies all around the Aegean Sea. And you can see that in all of this pink area is what was controlled by the Mycenaeans. So the Mycenaean weapons were stronger than other Greeks. And when I say Greeks, I'm talking about the other people who lived in Greece. Their weapons had spear tips and their sword blades were made from bronze. They used shields, they had bronze helmets lined with fur, and they had horses and war chariots. The story of the world says the Mycenaeans dominated the Aegean Sea and the islands in it. They were the first great Greek civilization. In 19.2, you learned about the Greek Dark Ages. The Mycenaeans ruled the area around the Aegean Sea for several hundred years. The Mycenaeans thought that they were civilized. They had houses with kitchens and bathrooms. The women stayed home. The men had these various trades, and the children went to school or had tutors. The Mycenaeans believed that they were the strongest people around. They had the best weapons. However, the sea people who you learned about from the Bronze Age collapse in John Green's video, the sea people learned how to make weapons out of iron, which is stronger than bronze. They used bows and arrows. They threw javelins. They built warships. But they were considered barbarians because they had no houses, no jobs, no writing, and they also spent their time attacking people and taking their countries instead of building culture and building their own cities and civilization. So then the invasion happens, and I've showed you this picture before when we looked at in our Bronze Age collapse video, but the sea people invade from the sea, the Dorians invade from the north in blue, the Mycenaeans are defeated, their cities are burned, they're destroyed, and they flee away. The barbarians then live in Greece for hundreds of years, and they don't leave written records. They only left destroyed cities, and this is considered, this time period that follows is considered the Greek Dark Ages. So let's begin talking about the Mycenaeans. Susan Wise Bauer says, while the Minoans of Crete were descending into increasing shabbiness and disorder, the cities on the peninsula north of the island were growing greater. So the Mycenaeans flourished on mainland Greece from 1700 to 1100 BC, and then they conquer Minoan Crete around 1500 BC. They're considered the first Greeks because they're the first people who speak Greek. So cool. And they're named after the city-state of Mycenae. I'm probably saying that wrong, and I'm sorry if I am. Characteristics of the Mycenaeans are that there was extreme class diversification between the rich and the poor. They were a warrior culture. Their military was always ready for battle. They traded with many other countries. Their agriculture was very well organized. They had these storage centers, and they kept extra crops in the palace as a tax. There were two groups of people who worked. There were palace workers and then self-employed people. The Trojan War is probably what the Mycenaeans are best known for. Probably you didn't, maybe you knew, but you probably didn't know that they were even called Mycenaeans because you just are like, they're Greek. But, you know, they are because they're considered the first Greeks. But anyway, they're best known for the Trojan War. The Mycenaeans attack the city of Troy, which is a major trading city. And this is written down by Homer. Now, we're going to study the Trojan War when we study Greece during the time of Homer. So we're going to study this during the time it was written down, not during the time it was happening. So let's talk about the cities. Susan Wise Bauer says the cities on the Greek peninsula, divided from each other by mountain ridges ruled over themselves from their earliest days. Despite this independence, the cities shared trade, a language, and culture. It is from the city of Mycenae, the largest of the peninsula, that the culture takes its name. As far as the history is concerned, Thebes, Athens, and Pylos are all inhabited by the Mycenaeans. And so she is saying that even though these cities are separated by mountains and each city controlled itself, they share a language, they share a culture, and so we can look back and consider all of them Mycenaeans. So I love this part. So I'm going to talk about two different city characteristics, the walls and the cisterns. But first, their walls are called Cyclopean walls, and they surround the Mycenaean citadels, and they're made from these enormous stones that hopefully you can see in these pictures. But they're called Cyclopean walls, Cyclopean walls, because they're built by giants, or the legend goes they were built by giants because the stones are so large that nobody but giants could have possibly moved these stones. Another city characteristics are the cisterns. So they're inside the citadels, and they were for holding water. They're usually underground, and there was a pipe or a tunnel system to carry water into the cistern inside the citadel, which I think is really cool. So Mycenae is the largest city. It's near the city of Corinth, and it was built on a citadel and hill over 912 feet above sea level. The palace was the center of the city, and the palace had something called the Megaron. And the Megaron is a large rectangular room, which was used as the throne room and probably used for religious ceremonies. And I'm sorry, when I think of like a large rectangular room called the Megaron, all I can think of is like Lord of the Rings. Anyway, other remains in Mycenae are tombs, shaft graves, fortification walls, and lion gates. And I'm going to show you some pictures. So here is in the city, this is the ruins of a house of an oil merchant. This is the citadel. You can kind of see it on this hill right here. Again, kind of see it right here. I would love to go see this one. You can see this better. This is the lion gate. You can see two lions. Sorry, this isn't the best picture. You can Google this if you want. And this brings us to Linear B, which is the Mycenaean writing system. So Linear B is a writing system used by the Mycenaean civilization. It's used between 1450 and 1100 BC. It's the oldest preserved form of written Greek. It's not the Greek that we'll have later, but it's the oldest preserved form of written Greek, and that'll make sense later. It's adopted from Linear A, which is the Minoan writing system. Now remember, the Minoan language isn't Greek, and Linear A is not deciphered. So the Mycenaeans come into the Minoan cultures, and they're like, hey, they have this writing system. They adopt it and make it work for their language. Most Linear B texts are administrative texts. They're like lists and records and things like that. But what's interesting about them is many names that they use in these texts are names of classical Greek gods like Zeus, Poseidon, and Artemis. From the Ancient History Encyclopedia, Christian Violotti talks about the end of Linear B. After the collapse of the Mycenaean political order in about 1200 BC, this is when the Bronze Age collapse happens, the use of Linear B script gradually diminished until it was fully abandoned around 1100 BCE. Literacy was completely lost in the Greek world until its return during the 8th century BCE with the emergence of a new writing system, the Greek alphabet. The Linear B script and the Greek alphabet are two completely different and unrelated writing systems, which reflect in a way how deeply Greece plunged into illiteracy and stagnation during the interval between the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization and the Greek Archaic period, a time known as the Greek Dark Ages. So think about that. Think about how much, like he says, how deeply Greece plunged to have to go from having a writing system, and then later you have another writing system, and they're completely different writing systems, but it's for the same language. And this is a result of the Greek Dark Ages, which we're going to talk about now. Most of this is review from the Bronze Age collapse video. So the time between the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization in 1200 BC and the Greek Archaic period, 800 BC, is known as the Greek Dark Ages. And this, the Greek Dark Ages are brought about due to the Bronze Age collapse. We have invasions of the Sea People and the Dorians. So dark doesn't mean, like Story of the World said, dark doesn't mean it's barbaric or anything like that. It's called dark because it's dark to us. Like, we don't know anything about it because we don't have their writing, because they didn't write. So again, Linear B fell out of use. We have no first-hand written documents during this period, so you must rely on archaeology to figure out what happened during this time. So some of the characteristics of the Greek Dark Ages is, one, literacy is lost. Like, I know I've said this before, but this is a big deal that they lose writing. Their palace economy and culture collapses. So all that stuff we talked about before, like the characteristics of the Mycenaean culture, like that is lost. The Mycenaean palace centers are destroyed and abandoned. They're not rebuilt. Some sites are reoccupied, but again, they're not like built back to what they were. Their strict class structure collapses. Depopulation happens, which just means their population shrinks instead of grows. And then migration from the Dorians and the Ionians, which we'll talk about next time. So I want you to remember this, that in the Greek Dark Ages, we're going to have three people groups living there: the Mycenaeans, the Dorians, and the Ionians, and that's where we'll begin next time. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.